Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Transportation Committee of the Sacramento Area Council of Governments. I'd like to call this meeting to order. If we could, Jessica, if you could please open up with some housekeeping items and informing the public how they can participate in the meeting.
Yes, absolutely. Good morning, everyone. Just a few reminders before we get started. This meeting is being recorded and will be available to view on SACOG's website after the meeting. For any members of the public tuning in today and who wish to make a comment, you can notify us by selecting raise hand or by pressing *9 if you're calling in by phone. All public comment will be limited to 3 minutes each. To help with timing, I'll give the speaker a 1-minute warning. And then for our committee members joining us today, please stay on mute until you're ready to speak, as this will help eliminate any background noise. And when you are ready to speak, please remember to use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you're phoning in to alert the chair.
Great, thank you very much. Now, can we go to the Pledge of Allegiance? If put a flag up on the screen, thank you. And wherever you are, please, if you could rise and follow me in the pledge, hand over heart. Ready, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, can we go ahead and move to roll call, please?
Yes, directors, please prepare to answer when I call your name. Director Bradford.
Here.
Branscombe, sorry. Desmond.
Here.
Ledesma for Guerrero.
Here.
Jennings.
Here.
Joyner, he's absent today. Saylor. Absent. Chenier.
Here.
Vice Chair Sander.
Here.
And Vice Chair Spokley.
Here.
Chair Soon.
Here.
And ex officio member Benapal.
This is Sue Tacker for MG Benapal.
Good morning, Sue. I'll let the record show that we have Ms. Tacker for Benapal. And we have a quorum.
Great, thank you very much. Welcome, Sue, as well, and everybody. Before we get started and move on to public comment, I just want to welcome our new Director of Transportation, Christina Svensk. She's taking over for Matt Carpenter. Hi. Good morning. Yeah, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's going to be really great to work with all of you. So thanks for introducing me to him.
You bet. You bet. All right. Now let's go on to public communications. Do we have any members of the public who wish to address the board for items not on the agenda?
No public comment.
None here. Okay, great. We will move on then to the consent calendar. We've got minutes from the last meeting for approval. Do I have any questions or comments from the directors? Hearing none. Any comments from the public on this item? Okay, seeing none. Also, I entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Desmond, I move to approve.
Okay, moved by Director Desmond. Thank you.
Branscombe seconds.
All right, seconded by Director Branscombe. Can we get a roll call vote, please?
Yes, Director Bradford.
Aye.
Thank you. Branscombe.
Aye.
Desmond. Desmond, can you indicate your?
Oh, aye. Sorry about that.
Thank you. Ledesma.
Aye.
Jennings.
Aye.
Joyner's absent. Saylor is absent.
Oh, I see
Chenier?
Director Saylor on.
Oh. Do you see him?
Chenier is the aye.
And I do see Director Saylor. I'm going to promote him to panelist. Sorry about that. Hi, Director Saylor.
Did
Are you
he
with
pass
us?
the test to be?
I think we got a vote. Yeah.
I don't know.
Hi, Director Saylor. Can you hear me?
Yes, I vote aye.
Thank you very much. Vice Chair Sander.
Aye.
Thank you. Vice Chair Spokley.
Yes.
Chair Soon.
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. All right, we'll move on to our one and only action item for this meeting. The public hearing amendment number 10 to the 2021 to 2024 Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program. Jose, good morning.
Good morning. Yes, hello, I'm Jose Luis Cáceres and I manage project delivery and the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program. Thank you, Chair Suen and the Transportation Committee for having me here today. Today's item is for action. We're asking that the Transportation Committee hold a public hearing, and after receiving comments from the public, we recommend that the Transportation recommend board approval. So let's just briefly talk about the MTIP, this acronym. The Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program sounds like the MTPSCS, but it's not. The MTPSCS is, it's our long 20-year horizon list of projects that are planned. The MTIP is our 4-year list of projects that have federal funding or are regionally significant and have work taking place in the next 4 years. Unlike planned projects, these projects are happening now or shortly. We do administrative modifications each month using delegated authority to our management. So the board doesn't realize that these projects are changing on a monthly basis. They're moving funds between fiscal years, they're having cost increases, cost decreases. Most changes to the MTIP project list are administrative and they fall within administrative thresholds. But occasionally, there are changes that rise to formal amendment levels. We have 5 categories of amendments, with category 5 being kind of the most significant type of change. Today's amendment number 10, falls under what we consider a type 4. And what it really means is type 4 usually means we're taking a project that is in the MTP and bringing it into the MTIP, not making changes to it in any substantial way, just saying, hey, this project that everyone has thought of as planned, it's actually going to be programmed with board approval. It's going to move forward. It's going to start some sort of federal reimbursable work. So this amendment has really only 3 projects in it. It's a tiny formal amendment, but these are 3 projects that necessitate this type of formal amendment. But before I talk about the projects, these projects, none of them affect our air quality conformity. That is our ability to attain our clean air goals on time. In fact, they don't even rise to the level of us needing to run an air quality model. Their completion years aren't changing. Their scope is not changing. I guess an asterisk on the scope thing, I'll come back later. No, they just wish to move forward, but correctly in our MTIP. And I meant to, at some point, actually commend Dustin Foster from our staff. He is the planner who is in charge of the MTIP. He was not able to present today, so I'm presenting on his behalf. Now, the 3 projects, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I will name them. There's the Southeast Connector D2A that is in our plan for PE right-of-way and construction. However, it's only been in our MTIP for just PE. This change brings right-of-way into the TIP. And they need right-of-way in order to start federally reimbursable right-of-way and in order to secure NEPA approval under the National Environmental Protection Act. There's an I-5 managed lanes project where we discovered some of the scope was duplicative of another project. So we just need to revise that scope, but to do that necessitates a formal amendment. And then there's another project where we had it listed as one type of exempt category. It's actually more appropriately another exempt category. Those are the 3 changes that we circulated for public review. Public review is still open. With that, I can take any questions. Well, we're hoping, Chair, that you would open a public hearing to receive comments from the public first.
Absolutely. We can go ahead and do that. Let's open up to public comments to receive. Is there anyone, Jessica, in the public who wish to speak on this item? Or
No one has their hand raised, and I haven't received any written comments.
okay. With that, I'm going to go ahead and close public comment and bring it back to the directors. Are there any questions from my?
May I, Chair Soon? As on the subject of public comments, we actually have received 2 or 3 public comments so far, and they're in the packet for everyone's reference. One is from the Southeast Connector JPA in support of the amendment. Another one is from Sacramento County in support of the amendment. And a third one that just came in yesterday was from Caltrans, and they want to make some minor funding changes to the amendment, which are absolutely administrative. And those are the comments we've received thus far.
So Jose, I'm glad you brought that up because when I clicked on that, it said the items were removed. So I'm not sure. Maybe was it just mine? Because
So I actually experienced, and we'll have Jessica weigh in. I clicked on a link that I had open yesterday, and some of the links changed from yesterday to today. So maybe refreshing the page is what was needed.
okay.
For Jessica, who's the administrative staff for the committee.
Okay, thank you.
I'm clicking on the packet right now. Yeah, I think if you refresh, you should be able to click open the
I
item.
do see them there, yeah.
Okay.
Mine still says attachment is no longer available. I'm hitting refresh.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it.
But let's, so Jose, are you able to just share your screen?
Absolutely. I've got it right here. Share screen.
Folks
The
that have viewed
specific
it.
attachments I would share would be the public comments section as it went out in the mail out, and then also the handout that has the most recent Caltrans comments. So I'm going to start with the public comments section as it went out.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, here's our staff report. Here's the contents. Here's the recent comment, and here's the comments section. I'm going to go to view, to this read mode, and make this bigger. Has everyone seen public comments received thus far?
Yes.
Fantastic. All right, so I'll pan down. The first is a letter from the Southeast Connector JPA. And I can summarize or I can leave it up for everyone to read.
Go ahead and summarize. Just short for folks.
It is directed to Mr. Foster, who's in charge of the MTIP, written from Matt Lampa, who is our staff that we coordinate with at the connector. And he thanks SACOG for the amendment. He articulates the importance of segment D2 and D2A, that it is a critical freight corridor providing access for mining and aggregate plants along the alignment. Finally closes that the reason for this letter is actually that there's a resolution. So it's not just a staff person writing support, but it includes the JPA resolution, as well as the Sacramento County Department of Transportation support letter. So we go to the first attachment. It's a resolution 2021-18, and it was dated August 27th. This amendment has been in the works at least for the last 4 months. Like I said, we get these requests from time to time, but this one wasn't pressing. So we wait until we have several other requests that require a similar sort of amendment, and this was the right timing for this. So it was dated August, and it says that the Southeast Connector has completed NEPA, and they filed it back in September last year, and they are eager to. They are ready to proceed with right-of-way, and they support therefore is the board of directors hereby supports amendment to the MTIP to program right-of-way phase for connector segment D2A.
Great.
Signed by 100% A's, no abstentions. And then the County of Sacramento wrote to Executive Director Corliss, signed by Director Vicari, and as a member of the JPA also supports amendment number 10, which is specifically including D2A.
Okay.
And then I'll move on to today's attachment. Let's see how I can close those things. All right. So the heading on it is, these are additional public comments received. We just received these yesterday. It was an email, so we copied and pasted into here. Felicia Furlong, who is our contact at Caltrans District 3, she coordinates particularly programming changes for all of District 3's projects. There is a cooperative agreement that has not yet been approved, but in that cooperative agreement, Caltrans would be moving $2 million back and doing a previous $2 million move that they had done earlier in the year. And that change is administrative, but if we make it now, then we don't have to come back and do another administrative modification to the tip. So Felicia Furlong is asking to move 2 million in CMAQ from one project to another. And that other project is not in this amendment. So this comment would necessitate us bringing a project into the amendment just to move that money. Also, there's 70,000 of SACOG managed funds that they had asked for engineering, and they are now asking for it to be moved to right of way. I'll just tell you right now, staff hasn't made an official response, but we support these changes and support them making the request. She includes as attachments just kind of strike through that show the 2 million being added to this project and the 70,000 being moved from engineering to right of way. And then down below the 2 million being subtracted from this other project that would be transferred over. Would you like me to go to any of the other files, or should I take off the share screen now?
No, I think we're good. Thank you, Jose.
Sure.
It's great for not just all the directors, but the public to be able to see these things firsthand too.
Absolutely. And that was our intention in attempting to post these things online.
No worries. I'm sure it's my inability to use technology. So I appreciate your accommodation. Okay, with that, are there any questions from the directors on this? I have a quick one, Jose, just on the 1 through 4 or 1 through 5, I should say. You said, if I read the staff report correctly, this is a type 4, not a type 5. Type 1 is the least. So I'm just wondering what the gradation is to 1, 2, and 3.
Absolutely. These types, we're not the only region that uses the same typology. These are used across California, perhaps at nearly every single metropolitan planning organization. And they date back to, well, there's always been an administrative amendment and a formal amendment since I was a kid. At some point, we realized not all formal amendments are the same. Some are a big deal and some are less of a big deal. And when the federal government revised the rules for public involvement procedures for amendments and adoptions, we were given the opportunity to pick our own public involvement process in consultation with transit operators, sponsors, the public. And when we developed the first public participation plan, we incorporated these gradations of amendments. That public participation plan, I think, is going before the board again this month for an update. That public participation plan is what describes the different levels of amendments, and we follow that public participation plan. So a type 1 administrative, we don't even really take it. I'm sorry, I can't remember all the public involvement, but we don't take it to the board. It's a very simple revision and administrative modification. In fact, when SACOG signs it, it's considered approved by Caltrans and considered approved by FHWA. The type 2, you might recall, Dustin brought a type 2 back before the board just maybe a couple months ago. That was amendment number 5. And that is when you're going to change project costs in such a way that exceeds a formal amendment. No air quality conformity determination required at all. It's just this project cost increased by over 45%. You got to take it to the public. Type 3 is a similar sort of change, and I unfortunately can't remember that one very well. We don't do type 3s that often. And then type 4 is this, a project coming from the plan to the tip, but not changing completion years, not changing anything substantially. It also includes this, a redetermination of an exempt category, those sorts of things. Even though everyone agrees they don't rise to the level of type 5, there's no modeling required. We take it before the board for the board action. We have public involvement, and we take it to the regional planning partnership. Type 5 is the biggest deal there is. This would be us changing the completion year on one or more non-exempt projects, or changing the scope of non-exempt projects. Our plan gets affected by that type of a change. We need to go rerun our air quality conformity model. It's got 30 days of review. It's a big deal. We actually try to avoid doing those types of changes. It's rare that someone needs to hurry up and change the completion year, especially since we adopt the MTIP every 2 years. It's almost like at any point in time, we're on our way to adopting the next MTIP, or we're in the middle of adopting the next MTIP. There's usually no reason to do a type 5, but every now and then, if you may recall the safe vehicle rule, there have been times for doing the type 5.
Thank you very much. It's very helpful. Director Saylor, I see your hands up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The hand is it says the same color as the background, so I appreciate your talent in observing it. Jose, I always appreciate the exceptional demystification that you apply to complex material. And I've got a question for you on the suggestions from Caltrans. Are you recommending that our action would include in this amendment to number 10 would include those suggestions?
Yes. Thank you for clarifying. And actually, there's a second clarification point I'd like to make. SACOG staff, obviously, we support the two comments in support of approval. We're recommending, the Transportation Committee recommend approval. For Caltrans's recent comments, we also support these. These are technical revisions that don't affect anything. In fact, we're getting ready to sign a co-op agreement that would also finalize or galvanize SACOG support in the fund transfer. These are CMAQ funds programmed by the board to Caltrans for the various highway managed lanes, and they're wanting to move it from this part of a highway managed lane to this other part of a highway managed lane. So yes, we support that. The second kind of clarification is our public involvement process is not complete. We still have till the end of today. Should we receive any additional comments, we would bring that before the board in the action, and it might necessitate bringing this from consent back to action for the board if we received any substantial comments by the end of today.
Is the public hearing ended, and is it appropriate to make a motion at this time?
Chair Soon?
Yes, well, I believe you have until 5 o'clock tonight, right? So, but I believe it's appropriate to make a motion. If there's no other comments from the directors, I'd entertain that.
I would move approval of a draft amendment 10 with the two modifications that have been described by Jose.
Thank you, Director Saylor. Do I have a second?
Director Bradford will second.
All right, thank you, Director Bradford. We have a second. Roll call, please, Jessica.
Directors Bradford,
Aye.
Branscombe,
Aye.
Desmond,
Aye.
Ledesma,
Aye.
Jennings,
Aye.
Joyner absent, Saylor,
Aye.
Chenier.
Aye.
Vice Chair Sander,
Aye.
Vice Chair Spokley.
Yes.
Thank you. And Chair Soon.
Aye,
Motion carries.
great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jose. Some important projects to keep moving forward. Okay, we're on to our information items. And I lost my view of my agenda, if you'll bear with me here. Item number 3, our next generation transit strategy. We had some good conversation about this last time. Good morning, Chris Storty.
Good morning, Chair Soon. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
Great, thank you. Give me a second while I share my screen.
Chair Soon and Chris, do you mind? I think everyone knows this, but perhaps I just want to set the stage before Chris presents to say, you took this item, you've heard it many times, you took it for action last month, but given the debate and the discussion you had and the comments you made, we as staff thought it was really important to go back, look at what's in this strategy and come back to you and incorporate some of those comments that you had. So that's what's happening today, in case there's anybody. I know Christina's talked to many of you, but just so everybody's clear what we're doing. And from today, it will go to the full board. But there's no vote today. The vote happened last month. This is just back to you to really do a deeper dive on what this strategy is, what it says, what it means, and what the next steps are.
Thank you, James. Appreciate that lead in.
Yeah, thank you, James. Do appreciate that as well. Again, Chair Soon and members of the committee, this item is an information item about the next generation transit study before you this morning. This item came before you at the last Transportation Committee, and you voted to approve this, to recommend approval to the board at that time. But again, because of that discussion, we thought it'd be prudent to bring it back and have a deeper discussion about the study and how it's going to move forward. Prior to the last meeting, we had been back to the committee and board cycle approximately 5 times since the start of this project. About a year ago, we kicked this project off, brought this back to you at every major decision point and deliverable to the process, and incorporated your feedback as we move through. As for the plan, to achieve this vision of the next generation transit in our region, it will require a shift in thinking in transit delivery and basically moving away from moving buses and vehicles and trains to the concept of moving people throughout our region. And really understanding what people and customers want out of a transit system that is the most effective for our region. To do this, we need to do the following. We need to offer frequencies and service that makes transit more competitive with driving. We need to address mobility disparities with our disadvantaged communities and low-income communities. We need to attract sufficient passengers to enable the sustainable and efficient land uses envisioned in the MTP SCS, and leverage existing and emerging technologies to enable seamless travel experience across the urban, rural, and suburban context that exists around our region. The plan had 3 primary findings in our region, and that is that transit trips in our region are very long and very slow. To put long and slow in context, the average transit trip moves on average 8 miles an hour compared to about 60 miles an hour of the average vehicle trip of the same trip. Our regional transit connections are difficult. If you live in a different county than you're starting your trip and then your destination, excuse me, those connections across our region and across transit agencies are more difficult than they should be. And all of these impacts adversely affect our disadvantaged communities, which make up about 38% of our region across the board. So it's a large swath of our community. To address these, we really need to look at the strategies that combat them specifically. We talk about increasing the speed of transit. This data here is pulled directly from the plan, and it was compiled from the replica big data platform that SACOG uses. If you look at the circles, public transit trip on average 61 minutes in our region, moving at 8 miles an hour versus, and that's for an 8-mile trip, versus driving alone. The average duration is 15 minutes and moving along at 61 miles an hour. We have a long way to go, so we start being comparable to a vehicle trip, whether it's shared or driving alone in our region. And transit needs to address this head on to be effective.
Interesting that biking shows is more effective there.
Yeah, there are some areas that it is definitely more effective. I can come back to that. To address this, the strategies we're recommending to this plan are things through our congestion points like bus-only lanes, queue jumps, or on our freeway systems in the interim, looking at bus-on-shoulder strategies that kind of start to bridge that gap in the near term, but transit or managed lanes in the future to get through those congestion points. To move to our regional transit options, for every other county in our region, except for the county of Sacramento, 50% of the trips that start in those counties end in different counties. And that's a large amount of trips in our region. This map here shows what are the top destinations throughout our region that are not downtown Sacramento. In conjunction with the underlying data is our residential and employment density. If you are trying to move between these points, it is very difficult to move within our if you're moving through 1 to 2 different transit agencies. I'm sorry, over 2 different transit agencies. Those connection points are not well planned and add additional time to that trip.
Say, who's number 1 on that map? I can't quite make it out.
I can expand it for you if you'd like.
Right. Yeah. Pretty sure
number,
that's
number 1 could be the first one to fall up. No, I'm kidding. But just a quick comment on the map. And I see Director Branscombe has his hand up as well. I don't know why number 2 Laguna is differentiated from 7 Elk Grove, and number 2 doesn't even appear. Laguna is actually farther down. So if we could take a look at that.
I appreciate that. That's actually a comment I made when I saw this map too, and that's something we're going to be correcting. literally that is a misplacement of that number 2. And we'll be correcting that before this moves forward, but it's just a GIS error or a weighting of the location, but it is not representative of where that is. So thank you for that.
Sure. And I just quickly, Director Branscombe, is that something you want to comment on now? Or can we wait till Chris is done? You're on mute.
Thank you. A quick question on the previous page. Can you go back to that? I'm looking at, I don't understand the numbers here. They don't compute with me. If you're driving alone and you're going 61 miles an hour, I can't go 11 miles anywhere in a metropolitan area and go 61 miles an hour average speed. So is that a real number?
This is pulled directly from the replica data, which is the big data platform that uses the cell phone data of how we move around our region to collect this information. But that is an average number.
Yeah, I'll be darned. Okay, well, average distance. Okay, it doesn't compute quickly, and I was wondering where that came from. But
sure.
The concept is I agree with the concept. The conclusion of this and that takes a lot longer to take public transit.
Agreed.
And that's, I think that, can you imagine that ever really changing?
Sure. Especially through transit corridors that are designed to move people versus vehicles, when we have things like bus-only lanes, queue jumps where the bus gets ahead of the vehicle so that it could be more dependable and faster. There are definitely opportunities to do this throughout our region. An interesting fact, if you increase the speed of transit by 25%, you've effectively created 25% more service on that line for no additional cost. So there are real efficiencies here that can be made to the speed of transit.
Chris,
how do you account for the sparsely populated suburban areas?
Director Branscombe, if we could just let Chris, let's just.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut him off. I apologize.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Well, it'll be a great discussion. We'll just let him finish. And I apologize for starting off on these comments.
Don't worry about it.
Thank you, Chair. I'll move on. We move to user experience. Another key strategy here is really making the transit experience a comfortable, efficient experience for our residents and our travelers throughout the region. Besides faster, more dependable service, there is ways we can do that that makes it easier, whether it's through integrated route planning across multiple modes and transit systems, or the end of the trip services and experiences through mobility hubs that offer a range of mobility options and placemaking components at that place, or co-branding strategies. And I hate to use an international example here, but this is a really good one, one that's very recognizable. The co-branding strategies really help when you, for those maybe who are new to the system, understand that it's all part of a coordinated system when the systems are co-branded together. Kind of build a bit of a regionality and a unity in the regional service. Reducing mobility disparities. We need to prioritize the needs of our disadvantaged travelers and remove the barriers in their participation in the process. There are voices there that are just not getting heard and how to meet their needs, and we need to correct that as we move through these processes. And also rethinking transit delivery. Some of our regional operators are already moving in this direction, most notably SAC-RT's latest plan moves in this direction. But it's back to that concept of moving people, not vehicles, buses, or buses throughout our region. To do this, we need to refocus on corridors that support high-frequency transit. These can be commercial corridors or other corridors that are designed to really meet the needs of people moving in this fashion. But also for those areas that are not supportive of that, looking at other service models and ways that we can program mobility to meet the needs of people in maybe lower density areas. On new on-demand services, the microtransit services come to mind here as a new, not even emerging technology anymore, but a way that we have started to address these needs. And we're sure that there are other ways in the future that will come and meet these needs as well. At the last meeting, we heard from this committee that the plan was not innovative enough, and I'd like to address that on a couple different points, and especially these two concepts that I'll move through that I think are really integral for our region's readiness for innovations of the future. First is really supporting our transit agencies moving into a mobility broker model. This is more of thinking outside of the 40-foot bus and into how can we better move people. And there's two good examples up here of some public-private partnerships that SACOG has led in supporting with our transit agencies to rethink a little bit about moving people around. But we have some needs in our region that definitely could be met without strictly a bus or even microtransit vehicle. I think Rancho Cordova is a great example where the employment density is on the other side of the freeway from a location where your biggest light rail station is, and identifying some method of getting people of a shuttle system or some kind moving back and forth, it would be really key to addressing that bridge. So we have a lot of opportunities in our region to kind of rethink this approach, and there's a lot of good opportunities to do that. And lastly, the concept of an integrated travel planning and fare payment. Imagine you're planning your trip for the next day. You're sitting at your house, you can use your mobile phone, and you go point to point. You say, I need to come to SACOG for the next board meeting. You type in whatever your house is, you type in 1415 L Street. That application in the future will give you a myriad of options of how to get to your destination and a myriad of choices that allow you to weight your time versus cost on that. So you'll be able to make that micro level economic decision making on the fly, and not have to make it at a monthly level when you pay for monthly parking or your monthly bus pass. You can make that on a day-to-day level, and all that is integrated into integrated fare payment, which is really the next generation and where things like Connect Card will be moving to. Is going to be all an app-based system, and it'll all be in the palm of your hand. The best parallel here I can just describe is on-demand transit services have been in existence for 30 plus years through dial-a-ride systems and things like that on smaller vehicles. What has made innovation and made them so innovative in the near term has been the infusion of technology and the technology of a mobile phone in your hand to leverage that better and more on demand and faster than planning your trip the day before. So this is really the foundation in which we will build innovation for mobility in our region moving forward. Many other regions are moving to this concept now. We're probably a little bit behind, and we should be accelerating this as much as possible, because any future innovation and technology that is coming in mobility will be built on this kind of platform. So we need to do that and get ahead of this so that we are better positioned for the technology of the future. And really, this plan was a very high-level framework, really meant to create a strategy for a long-term vision. Really, for lack of a better term, where the rubber meets the road is how we're going to implement this plan. And that's really where the important things are going to happen. And in the near term, these three things are what we're already focusing on here as staff. We're looking at a capital improvement plan and prioritization plan that focuses on what those improvements are needed in the public right-of-way and freeways to speed up transit in our region, to really get to that 8 mile-an-hour average speed and raise that as much as we can through the congested corridors that we do have in our region, to make it more effective and more competitive against driving. This will leverage some effort that SAC-RT has just done on some planning efforts, but take this to the regional level. We're also looking to launch a regional mobility hub plan that will identify where the opportunities are and identify the different type of typologies around mobility hubs that can address whether it's in a very urban context, a suburban context, or a rural context, what modes and what things need to be programmed with those to make them successful in those land use areas that we range across our very diverse region. And really the thing that I think underscores all of this recovery effort moving forward is we need to get out a little bit of a crystal ball. We need to expand, we need to know where the return to work effort is happening as we emerge from the pandemic. We started this task force a few months ago with contacts from the state of California, SACOG staff, and our transit agencies. We are looking to expand that to bring in members of representatives from workforce from the private sector and other entities to have a bigger discussion about the return to work plan so that we can get the information faster and incorporate that to our transit agencies so they are better positioned to meet the needs of the public as they have come out of this immensely disruptive time. So we are working very closely and to make sure that they have as much information as possible and leverage the tools that SACOG does really well to help them plan on that moving forward. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions. And I believe also my colleague, Mike Roston, is also on the line and available for any questions as well.
Thank you very much, Chris. Very informative. I saw a hand go up. Here we go. Director Bradford.
Yeah, just a comment about the integrated fare payment, and hopefully moving that to mobile is more of a short-term goal than a longer-term goal. I know I recently had some experiences with that in some other regions. I was in DC and was pleasantly surprised that their regional, the equivalent of Connect Card in DC, I could just, get my iPhone and buy a card and pay for transit right on there and use it to ride their metro. And then a few weeks ago, I went with my wife to San Francisco and we took BART, and the same thing was possible in the Bay Area. So different card, but purchased it right on my iPhone, paid for BART, then in the city, used my iPhone to pay for transit on MuniRail. And it was just amazingly convenient to be able to pay for that and use it right on my phone. So I hope we're looking at doing that with our Connect card in the near future.
That is the plan in the framework I think they're looking at moving forward. It's a statewide initiative out of Caltrans, actually called Cal ITP, Integrated Travel Planning. And it's also looking at that integrated fare payment and coming up with standards that jurisdictions can use. So we're not all reinventing the wheel every time we do it. And therefore you could use the same system to take RT to Capital Corridor to the Bay Area, all through an integrated system that's all built on the same back end. So
Okay.
that's the general goal of all this is what we're looking at doing. So
awesome. That's even better.
Mm-hmm.
Director Sander.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. My concerns in this process are that we're just not really being aggressive enough. And perhaps we're not seeing the context clearly enough. The challenges we've got with transit are not related to COVID. They are in part. I've seen projections that suggest we've got 10 to 20% reduction over 2019 numbers coming as fewer and fewer people are commuting to an office post COVID. I've seen those projections, so that would certainly apply to us. Maybe much more so, given that the major downtown employer is the state of California. And the last number I heard from them, they were talking about needing 40% fewer employees at the office, 40% less office space actually in downtown Sac. So there is a COVID impact, but that's not as big as the trend that was going on for the decade before, or really, the decline and change in people's transportation needs with regard to transit since like 1945. What we need is a fundamental rewrite of how transit does business. And it's extraordinarily difficult to do because these agencies have a lot of stakeholders and interested parties. I know when I was chair of RT, I really felt boxed in by all of the either federal requirements or state requirements or the local political requirements, if you will. And so I have seen some changes in regional transit in particular, you know, a move towards microtransit, although it's a 27-foot bus instead of a minivan, like VIA has done in West Sacramento. But I think there is so much more we could do. And particularly in a time when we are focused on equity, and you can very easily see that, you know, the poor population of our region is not in the central city. The poor population of our region is spread by and large in suburban areas, lower density suburban areas. And serving them with almost any kind of a bus, I mean, you can't even begin to talk about bus rapid transit with any kind of a useful footprint to serve that enormously non-dense population. So we need a fundamental rethink of how we do things. And what I see in this plan, and you have to forgive the analogy, but it's almost like you're rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic that's been sinking since 1945. And we have great local examples of how to do things better. You know, VIA in West Sacramento is a huge success. And you can look for bigger jurisdictions around the country and see a VIA-like operation being very successful. I don't know. We're in a time right here and we have the ability at this point to make change. And I don't think this plan is nearly aggressive enough.
But Vice Chair Sander, you know, I agree with your sentiment that there needs to be more done. We need to rethink it. That's rethink transit. And that's why the name, the next generation transit concept. There definitely are more, you know, current things in this plan. But the reason why I advocated and the committee, we adopted this plan right now is this is a planting of a flag. This is a statement and bringing people together to work on exactly what you're talking about. I think those details can be worked out in these task force that will be created to talk about these things. And as I heard Chris mention earlier today, I'm glad it's not just focused on buses and shuttles. It's about mobility throughout the region. And I think transit needs to be a component of that. You know, we talk about roads a lot and they're very important. I love my car as well, but we also recognize the need for a multimodal system in this region. And I'm glad that you're not happy with this plan right now because we all know there's more to do. So that just means that we're all on board on making a better plan and continuous improvement of this. Director Sealer.
Sorry, Chair Soon, do you mind if I?
Yeah, sure, James. Yeah.
If I jump in here, because I know this, look, I hope everybody appreciates that we, as I said earlier, we wanted to put a pause on this and go back and I think really I commend Chris for doing a great job on trying to communicate what's in this strategy and how important this is for the region, for us to actually meet all of our goals. You know, I always appreciate Vice Chair Sander, your skepticism and your tough love on some of these things, because I think it's needed. And I, you know, either this morning or as we go forward, that's partly why again, my mistake perhaps last time for telling Chris not to present, because I felt like you'd already heard this study too many times. But why I wanted to make sure that you all understood what was in this strategy, because I think what I hear from many of you is indeed what we are saying. Now, it's not all going to be technology and the shiniest objects, as we've said. And some of these strategies, many of them, and Vice Chair Sander, you said since 1945, what's happened since 1945? We had a land use pattern that evolved, right? That actually made it almost impossible to serve high density transit. What is part of the solution here? Not to bury this part of it, and Chris mentioned it, but part of the solution in this next gen strategy is getting our land use where we can, and we have opportunities. Green means go, green zones. We have a lot of opportunities to do land use. Where does that fall? All of you as local governments. We need to speed up transit. What could we do with that? Well, we're all in that together. but we also need to dedicate lanes. We need to build out our express lane network, which is why Caltrans is so important, right? And so as I've said, staff, the worst opinion anybody can have over our work is no opinion at all. So I'm glad we're having this discussion, this debate. I want to truly understand a lot of your concerns or the need to do more, the need to be more innovative. I will say one more thing, just this is the Transportation Committee and the desire to be provocative, but honestly, I think this is really important. We welcome your scrutiny. We welcome your skepticism. We have to have that. But I want to see as much scrutiny and skepticism on the highway side as we're hearing on the transit side. I want you to ask on the highway side, this is really the best way to move people? Is this the best investment? Could we do this leaner and meaner? Have we thought about all the innovative solutions on the highway construction side, right? Because I don't think we're nearly meeting that mark, and maybe we need a next generation highway strategy, which I would argue there's bits and pieces of that are emerging indeed. One of which is pricing. So again, we welcome your skepticism. We'd like to see that across the board for everything we do here, because frankly we can't afford all the stuff we say we want in this region in terms of infrastructure. So we got to be smarter. And we're very open if we're not actually still hitting the mark on this, but I asked Chris, and I really wanted you all to understand what's a part of this strategy, because I think if we can get 80% of what's in there in this document in the next 5 years, we'll be well on our way. But that is not an easy task, and we're going to need all of you, and we're going to need the state of California, we're going to need the federal government to help us.
Thank you, James. Director Saylor and then Director Branscombe.
Thanks, Chair Soon. I see a lot of what Director Sanders is talking about captured in some of the findings and the strategies. And of course, this particular document is the purpose of it is to set a vision, and it will only be a framework for our strategic look at how we advance the purpose in the time to come. Director Ledesma and Stallard and Frericks and I served together on the Yolo County Transportation District Board. And I'll tell you that the concepts that are articulated here resonate for me with the work that we are trying to do and that we are launching. For example, we're very excited about the opportunity with the managed lane project over Interstate 80 that we're working with District 3 Caltrans folks to make happen with SACOG and YCTD. It takes all of us on these major changes to work together in teamwork. One of the pieces that Chris presented today that resonates with me a great deal is this co-branding concept. We have a partnership with Regional Transit and YOLO Bus to operate a shared service called Causeway Connection that crosses between UC Davis and the UC Davis Health Center. That we're working. They run half of the buses. We run half the buses. RT runs half. YOLO Bus runs half. And that made sense at the time to get it started and implemented. There's a governance question there. We're now working on how do we adjust to driver shortages and operational changes and ridership that's much lower than we ever predicted it might be because of COVID and because of just an uptick in the acceptance. And we're finding that we have challenges just to operate because the buses have equipment that doesn't communicate, that is not the same from one system to another, one operator to the other. So we've got work to do on interoperability on something as simple as that. I'm really excited about the idea that we're improving light rail and heavy rail intercity passenger service between Sacramento and Roseville, that we are working on expanding rail service to the Sacramento airport with our partners in San Joaquin. there are many moving pieces that are moving. The fact that we can point to RT's Smart RT and VIA and some of the other micro transit implementation of projects in rural sections of Yolo County and Winters and Knights Landing, and we're about to do a similar launch in Woodland. The fact that we can point to those in this document indicates to me that we are making progress. We are looking at where we need to go and starting to, and maybe baby steps, but we're moving that way. YOLO Bus has about a year and a half ago, completed a comprehensive operational assessment that has us re-examining all of our routes and focusing, just as this document suggests that we do, on the major backbone corridors and reducing some of the extraneous routes that will always have low ridership. That doesn't mean we don't serve the mobility needs of people who are off, in a sense, off the urban corridor, off the grid, so to speak, for transit. It means that we have to find different ways to connect them. So the informational platform that Chris described of multimodal use, from that last mile to how you connect with one of the core services, that's exactly the kind of conversation and the kind of implementation we have. I think that we need. I think we're making a lot of sort of baby steps, and some that are not so baby. We expanding the connectivity between West Sacramento and the core of Sacramento is a key part of our focus as a region. And I think the kind of the prelude to this document, the preface that basically says that we must move transit we must be able to move people around in order to achieve our overriding objectives by 2040. I think there's a lot that we need to do. There's no question about it. I think this is a good staging document for us. And then it's up to us to make sure that if we're planning a new neighborhood, we frankly need to look at what its impact on mobility is going to be. Yolo County eliminated a specific plan for the city of Dunnigan a few years ago because there were no jobs. It was going to be just a bunch of houses out in the middle of the country. Didn't make sense from a greenhouse gas or any other kind of investment perspective. So I think we have to, as local government leaders, we should be looking at documents like this as a part of our lens for making our policy decisions on land use, on making our policy decisions on where we focus job creation and job locations, as well as housing and the other infrastructure that we're going to be moving forward. I'm sorry to speak so long, but there's a lot in this document that I think gives us guideposts for the decisions we have to make as a SACOG board and in our other chairs.
Thank you, Director Saylor. Director Branscombe.
Thank you. Thanks, Sharon. First of all, I commend this document. At the same time, I commend Director Sanders' the thrust of his comments. And I think his comments, the way I interpret them, is currently we're trying to optimize in a suboptimal situation. We've got low density, route challenges, and technology that is evolving and is probably, I think, has not yet evolved to a point where you can take the Sacramento region, which has always been known as a rubber tire community, and convert it to something that we're envisioning into the future. So here we are in the now. And again, I commend this document. It's optimizing a very difficult situation. And it's imperfect, and it's a step along the way. The long-term goals are probably hard to figure out. Here we are. I've been told often, I hear oftentimes, people born today will not get a driver's license. Everything's going to be self-driving. Does that mean we'll be able to send shuttles directly to users of transportation in the not too distant future, and we won't have a labor component which will really affect the cost of delivering that service. And then the next something that I don't think is getting enough attention is the fact that most of these vehicles 10 years from now will be electric. And as I'm sure most of you know, it used to be that the electricity at night was the cheapest and most plentiful electricity in California. That's no longer true. The most plentiful and cheapest electricity is electricity available in daylight hours when people are using and not charging vehicles. And that's going to be a challenge that is going to have to come into the orbit of our thinking on these. So I find this to be a very stimulating conversation. Again, I commend this document. We've got a suboptimal situation because of the challenges we face, and this is the best that can be done now. And it seems to be on a track, and so long as we keep in mind the kinds of challenges that Director Sanders puts out there, let's think big, let's think long, and push ourselves. I'm sorry, this sounds too much like a speech, but again, I think the electric challenge is a big one, and I think it's helpful. I think it's going to be essential for us to think on converging our today efforts on what we anticipate the technology 10 years is going to be, 10 years from now is going to be. That will make us most successful. Thanks for your time. Thanks.
Thank you, Director Branscombe. Director Ledesma.
Thank you, Chair. And I just want to take a quick minute to, again, I think this document is great, setting sort of the roadmap to where the region should go. And I'm to my other fellow directors, I understand the ambition or the aspiration to move towards this, how the document that we collectively thought about should push us, and it should. And I always get caught up in how we go about implementing it. I think it's Director Saylor is right in terms of it's kind of up to all of us. This document wasn't in place when we thought about VIA. It wasn't in place as 10 years ago, we started talking about a streetcar connection into West Sacramento, or past 10 years now. We just knew we had to move people around, and efficiently. We have two usable non-freeway bridges, and one's barely usable after being built in 1910. So we have to be ours is, necessity is the mother of all invention for us. And we have a large population that goes to each of your cities. I said this the last time, and we've pursued it. I appreciate that our VIA service is put up on as an example every time we have this discussion. And I really try to limit myself in terms of having to respond, because it is, but I'm trying to incorporate the mindset, or at least the ability we've had over the last 10 years to move the needle, because we just did. I don't know of a better way to say it. There was no plan. There was no long study. I know the former mayor advocated to all of you for a long time on this stage, and we were there along the way, but this came out of the need for us to find more efficient ways to move people around outside of the yellow bus, until we have a really great board now on the yellow bus that's really thinking along the right lines to complement. So I would just urge everybody to, as you go back to your respective agencies and your respective local governments, we all can go past this plan. I don't think anybody's saying this plan limits you in any way. And I think that's the challenge for all of us. And I just want to thank Chris for going back, and James for going back and trying to address the need for this, to push the board and forward and the region forward. I think all these ideas are great, and we'll take, for me at least, I think I always try to think of it as the best is the enemy of the good. If we can get a little better tomorrow with one move, and I know I can think of 3 projects right now that either West Sac or Yellow Bus are trying to move along with Sac RT and others. Those are real movements. I know, Mr. Sander, your community is #1 in that map. I think we have a possible connection to help getting some of our residents to to your city a little easier if we connect it to the light rail system. And those are things that if we all thought about in that respect, we can move the needle. So again, just want to thank staff for all the good work on this. It certainly sets a vision and a blueprint.
Thank you, Director Ledesma. You know, I love this conversation, and it just reinforces the need for this document. It's brought attention to this matter. I mean, this conversation is great, and I look forward to ongoing conversations. Vice Chair Sander makes some great points and pushes us in the right direction. There's some things in there, as Director Saylor mentioned, that are positive and can be implemented now. But there's one thing that is constant, which is change, right? So we have COVID. We're dealing with a new work environment that's a new, mobility in terms of people's patterns. That's still settling out. Technology continues to change. So I view this document, Next Generation, as more about aspirational and a movement, which is why the update is important, and the need to bring more people into the conversation, our transit operators. So the need for governance, that conversation is critical as well. But us policymakers coming together, I think, is the very first step, settling on a vision, a comprehensive vision for the region, and then talking about how we're going to implement that policy, making it, hitting the right markets, as Director Branscombe always reminds us of, and making sure we're forward thinking, as Vice Chair Sander continues to emphasize. Jessica, can we just see if this is an informational item. Is there anybody in the public that wishes to speak on this?
No, there's no public comment.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just quickly, I want to, James, many of us went to Denver a while back, and that kind of started all this conversation originally. Do you want to share with the board maybe what your plan is to expose all of us to, what's possible in this realm and in other regions?
Christina, do you want to give an update?
Yeah, thank you. I just want to first thank everybody here for their comments. I just want to reiterate that staff is listening, and we're hearing what you're saying, and we definitely want to work with you. So at the board meeting, the upcoming board meeting, this item is going there next. We plan to do a workshop with you all on this item specifically, and I think that's going to be another opportunity for us to dive deeper into this and into the concept that Chair Soon just mentioned. So we plan to have some, at least a speaker there, which we can confirm later, but really give us an opportunity to talk about these things in more depth, and hope that we can find some, paths forward for each of these different strategies and concepts that are important to everybody here.
Great. Thank you very much. Look forward to that. Okay. Let's move on. Next item, informational item we have is the 2024 Metropolitan Transportation Plan Sustainable Community Strategy Update. Ms. Abraham, good morning.
Good morning, Director. And my name is Binu Abraham, and I am the project manager for the 2024 MTP-ACS. Give me a second so that I can share my screen. All right, I hope everybody can see that. Thank you.
Yes, we can see it, yeah.
Thank you. So this is an informational item on Metropolitan Transportation Plan and Sustainable Community Strategy. Yes, we know it's a mouthful, so we call it MTP-ACS, which is still probably a little mouthful, and we lovingly call it the plan. Last month was the kickoff of the MTP-ACS. This month, I would like to give an overview of what is MTP, and then go on a little bit in depth about the work schedule that's ahead for us, the long-term planning, and the process on how we are planning to achieve to adopting a plan in 2024. So what is MTP SES? MTP SES is a long-range plan that combines land use strategies with transportation investments to meet the varying travel needs of the residents in the SACOG region. It's a plan that creates an integrated multimodal transportation system paired with an efficient land use pattern that connects housing to jobs, education, goods and services, and recreational opportunity. This plan is updated every 4 years, and it is a federally and state required policy document. It marries the local land use development with the transportation projects to build a better connected community. In addition to providing multimodal transportation options, it is financially constrained. It provides us a path for improving the air quality while preserving our open space and natural resources. So how is the plan organized? The entire plan and the work around this plan can be divided into 5 main components. We start with the long-range economic forecast or the growth forecast. And the growth forecast is projections that set the population, employment, and household totals for the plan horizon year based on long-term growth trends, demographics, and economic data. Once we have the growth forecast adopted and set, the next step is to do the land use forecast. This is where we coordinate with all our local jurisdiction staff to forecast and understand the land use allocation and the transportation project list. Next, we do a revenue forecast and overlay the transportation and land use projects to develop our transportation investment. After that comes the tedious and complex work of the data analytics to determine if we are meeting our performance measures and we are able to achieve all the requirements of the state and the federal mandates. Finally, we develop the policies and strategies, and then the board adopts those. So everything over the next 2.5 years, not exactly 2.5, a little short of 2.5 years, can be classified as work in one of these 5 categories. So staff has taken an effort in trying to come up with a schedule or a process map that can outline what that will look like. And here is a draft of that. So starting from now, fall of 2021, we have divided the entire work of MTP into 7 phases. Each phase culminates in either a board action or a milestone achievement, which is crucial for the smooth transition of the next phase. So one of the reasons we wanted to bring you this, well, a couple of reasons we wanted to bring you this, one is for transparency. We wanted to give you an idea of the entire process of how this is going to be in case anybody is interested in one or a part of it or the whole process, and they want to get involved, and they will have an idea of when they can provide their input and when they can get more involved in this. The other reason is because everything, as I mentioned, is so stringent on meeting the previous phases and deadlines and milestones that any changes in it will create an overall change on our plan adoption date. According to this, at the end of phase 7, which would be the spring of 2024, we would be adopting our plan. This will be like our roadmap. This is right now, it's a draft, and staff will be fine tuning it and bringing you this process map along with other components for adoption later on. Each time we go to a next phase, I will be looking at this roadmap to develop and explain what we will be doing. So right now, let's focus on phase 1, which is happening right now. So the phase 1, which happens in October and ends in winter of 2022, or rather February of 2022, will have a couple of different items. It will have a framework. It will have a local agency review and input. It will have the growth forecast and an engagement strategy, and finally, policy framework. So the framework is every 4 years, we get a chance to revisit the focus areas of the last plan based on the changing needs of the region. Next month or in November, staff will bring you recommendation on topics and policy areas that are of local and regional significance that should be considered or explored in more detail. In December, we will be looking at the growth forecast or the economic forecast that I was showing you as a first component in the MTPSES. The projections set will be our first totals that everything else will be based on. In January, we will have an engagement plan, or the staff will propose the strategy for board to consider to guide the stakeholders, partner, and public outreach of the plan. And if you notice that I skimmed over the local agency review, and that is because my colleague Sam Shelton will be going over it in more detail in just a few minutes. So if we keep going, all these factors will culminate at the end of phase 1 in a board action, which will be in February of 2022. The components that will go into it is this process map that I just showed you, but in the finalized version, along with a growth forecast, a framework, and an engagement strategy. And I want to pause here for a second to see if there are any questions before I hand it over to Sam Shelton to go over the sponsor engagement strategy or local land use or local review.
Thank you, Banu. Are there any questions from the directors? I don't see any hands up at this time. Okay, I think we're okay, Banu. Yeah.
Thank you. So next portion, Sam will be going over how we are going to do the local agency review for our land use and transportation projects.
Thank you, Banu. Just start sharing my screen. So let's try using the MTP-SES timeline slide for a moment. I want to give you a sneak peek at one of our next steps, which is about building the transportation project list that is used for scenario development. So those steps take place after the board will adopt the policy framework guiding how we build the MTP-SES, and that will take place in February, right, Benny? And what that involves is engaging project sponsors who are usually cities or counties, transit operators, Caltrans, folks that are the lead agency on projects that need to be listed in the transportation plan. What that process looks like is usually SACOG staff meeting with project sponsors. We're reviewing spreadsheets of detailed project data and collecting planning documentation and engineering diagrams. Since we do this once every 4 years, we typically need to help local agency staff understand how best to work with SACOG. So how can we make this easier? We made this FAQ that's attached to your committee agenda. It has questions from past cycles and process update suggestions for this next upcoming cycle. So perhaps maybe this is your first 4-year cycle for a plan update. We've got some basic and general questions for you to bring you up to speed. Let's say that this isn't your first rodeo and you have more detailed questions. We have sponsor questions to help you understand what happened before, perhaps how to submit projects, why projects were rejected last time, and the kind of details we're looking at in this upcoming cycle. Especially for key changes in process improvements, such as new tools, such as interactive GIS web maps. Here's a few screenshots from an application we've been testing for a little while, as well as new ways to request transportation project nominations, such as looking into VMT reduction strategies and equitable sponsor engagement. So that's just a brief update on where we're headed, and be happy to answer questions about the questions in the FAQ, as well as help add on to it should you have good ones today.
Thank you very much, Sam. Are there any questions from the directors? Okay, Director Branscombe, I think are you saying you have a question?
Thank you. Real quickly. Let's see, it takes land use planning and transportation planning coordinated together for this to really work, correct? Which is driving which? Because most of land use planning I see today is no different than 20 years ago. I mean, there's obviously some evolutions, but when I drive to Sacramento and I see all the residential development out in the former cornfields and rice fields, it looks pretty similar. And so it seems like the convergence, how effective are the efforts to bring those two planning scenarios together? I presume that's what you're talking about.
Who do you want to answer your question?
Anyone who's got an idea.
Christina, are you? Oh, go ahead, James. Yeah, sure.
Look, I was going to say, I really appreciate, I think the staff really appreciates your question that because for a long time, as a transportation person myself, we've looked at it in a silo. And what this plan does and what we should be doing is looking at the interaction between these two things. I would suggest we might want a board lunch or board workshop to actually dive into this and to really get at the interaction between these two things. It is the reason for the blueprint in this region as a bottom-up voluntary process being adopted in 2004. We do believe we have different land use patterns than we might have otherwise had. The question is if they are enough and they're happening quick enough, because we've also got a lot of, I think, even when I see a lot of the new suburban greenfield growth that's being planned for the region, it looks very like the car is the only way in and the only way out. There is no other thought being given sometimes enough. So it is the question of the MTP-SES, which we are going to get you a better name for, by the way, so you don't have to remember 6 letters. It's the key question. And the other thing I would just say is, this is not a wish list. It's a federally required and state required plan, and we're trying to make it as much of a regionally owned plan as we can. But we have a lot of fiscal constraint. We have a lot of constraint on this plan. And
if I may, my question wasn't intended as a criticism, and maybe it's just me demonstrating my grip on the obvious. The land use historic, and at least in the current, is the big challenge to the transportation planning.
Yeah, I didn't take it as a criticism. I guess I was just trying to
thank you.
Maybe give you a sense of it is really important. We have a pretty balanced land use strategy in our current plan. I would say it requires and it forecasts and has policies and assumptions around a balance of greenfield, suburban revitalization, and urban infill. It is why green means go, and green zones are so important, like downtown Marysville and downtown Yuba City. But even some of our edge growth can be planned, we think, with transportation in mind, a little bit better than we have done it in the past. So as I say, it's a hard one to give you a quick answer on, but I think it is the core question.
Dr. Saylor.
Darren, one of the things that I appreciate about the presentation that we're seeing today is that it's a little bit different. The MTP-SES adoption process is different from what we do normally in our city council and board of supervisor meetings, where we have a lot of the work that we have. It's kind of a one-off thing that we get an issue on our agenda, we take an action on it, it's done. And it doesn't necessarily build one step incrementally or iteratively to something else. That's different from this MTP-SES process. So for anybody who is new to the board since our last formative stages of this, I really call our attention to this flow chart that shows the nice colors of when there's a key board decision and what the staff work and the public processes are, because every step that we take builds for the next ones. So that means that there's a key reason for us to pay attention to these early stages, because that's when we set the major policy framework. And it's much harder to change or tweak stuff as we get down the road. So 6 months, a year after we've set the framework, having a detailed conversation about the policy framework is not very productive. It doesn't help us. It might have, it kind of causes people to have to do work over again that they thought they had already arrived at consensus on. That doesn't mean once we get moving further and we see the consequences of our early decisions that we can't change it if it's needed, but it's certainly a lot easier to make those decisions early in the process. So what I encourage our staff to do is to take this flow chart and flesh out even a little bit more when there is a decision, when they're coming to us just to inform us about the process. That's just tell us. But when there's a key decision for us to make that builds to the next and the next and the next, I think we should populate a little bit more when those are going to happen. And this, I noticed that this one says we're going to be adopting a policy framework in the winter of 2021, which is pretty darn soon. So I think we've got a little bit more, probably 2 or 3 more conversations before we get to that point. So I see today's presentation as this is setting the stage. Here's the work we're going to be doing together for the next 3 years. And the more we can focus on what decisions we make today and tomorrow and how they make it, how they kind of set the stage for the time to come, the more effective we're going to be as a board and as individual board members.
Thank you, Director Saylor. Yeah, excellent comments. The early engagement is very much appreciated with our staff, between SACOG staff and our respective city and county staff. And I agree, Director Saylor's point is, if there's a pending decision forthcoming, that I think it'd be great for this committee to hear about it ahead of time. I just want to quickly address Director Branscom's question. I mean, it is a chicken and the egg thing. And, this document, the MTPSCS, right, balances the constraints we have economically for funding for our projects, as well as our air quality criteria. But also, the push-pull is what all of us do at our respective jurisdictions, the needs of our community, the market, the development housing market, and the visions that we all set for our respective communities. So that's always the push-pull, is what are we doing locally that we believe is right versus how does that fit into this regional plan that is constrained by economically and also air quality requirements that we have to meet. So just wanted to highlight that. And so we look forward to a future workshop and discussions on that. But it's something that, I'm glad you raised the issue, Director Branscom, because it's an important one. Okay. With that, again, I think we're going to move on. I don't see any other comments in the chat, and our panelists and the attendees. I don't see. I'll open up officially to the public, but if anyone in the public wants to make a comment, and I'm not seeing anyone. Okay, so I'll close public comment on this item, and let's go to our next item. Item 5, the update to the Sacramento Region Parks and Trails Network. Victoria, good morning.
Good morning. We are still in morning, and this has been some really great discussion to hear everybody working through on both Next Gen Transit and MTPSCS. There are so many topics I wish I had more time to cover and how these are all going to fit together. But in the meantime, I will provide a brief update on the Sacramento Region Parks and Trails Strategic Development Plan. Originally, we were on schedule to present a draft network at this meeting. to you all, but I wanted to follow up. We are still working on that for a host of reasons that I'll get into in a short bit. You know, stepping back, what is the region's Parks and Trails Strategic Development Plan? This is us working with all of your staff, so with our cities, our counties, and other invested partners in the lines of nonprofits, and to the extent that they're able to weigh in, community-based organizations, to identify a regional trail network that is going to connect communities across our 6-county region. There's obviously a lot to unpack within that. We are looking at what we can do to bring together all of the really great local plans that people have and form a network that's going to be greater than the sum of its parts. So let me move on to where we are, what we've done up to this point. This is a multi-year project that we've been working on, and a good amount of it we spent in early 2020 looking at what are the existing and the planned bikeways, and by bikeways I mean trails or other high comfort facilities such as class 4s, the other trails that maybe don't meet Caltrans specifications of what it means to be a class 1 trail with a certain design width, a stripe down the middle, this much of DG or the gravel parts on the side that allow sufficient space for people to walk adjacent to the paved area. Working with everyone at the local level to see what's on the ground and what are we working towards. What's on your planning documents that are going to be able to stitch the region together with trails. And we also look to vet some things that we suspected might be true in our region, but we wanted to take a more thorough analysis. And what I mean by that is that at a statewide level, there is a known discrepancy in access for disadvantaged communities to trails and parks. And we found that that is also the case in our region. If you're in a lower income household in our region, you are 30% less likely to have some form of a connecting trail near you. And we know that that is not something that can just be taken in stride and say, well, you know, that's what it is. Once you know these things, you know that we have our responsibility as public agencies to ensure that there is even benefit to where we invest public resources and to how these transportation assets are distributed throughout our region. I think it's looking like it might have some glitches with the calendar, but where we've been earlier this year, we did a public survey to learn more about what is important to people as far as what they want to connect to and how those values of what's important for them to be able to connect to in trails is going to inform the development of the regional network. And so for the last several months, we've been working one-on-one with cities, counties, and additional partners as we're able to bring them in to identify what this connected network is going to be. And we are now working towards having a draft network alignment, so that draft alignment of trails that'll connect from community to community within our region, having that available in November. So when I mentioned the regional vision and our goals and values, this relates to what we are able to learn from all of the local plans from the cities, from our counties, through multi-jurisdictional planning efforts. When you have something like the Dry Creek Parkway that involves multiple counties and multiple cities. what is going to rise to the top as far as what these connections are going to bring. And when we were looking at all of these local plans, the regional plans, and then also cross-checking for alignment with state planning goals and objectives, you found that there are 6 goals that are really going to define what is valuable to this region, what we've all been able to agree on, even though every city is very different from the city next door, every county is very different from the county next door. So within these high-level goals that we have, earlier this summer, we presented some different ways that we might measure progress towards these goals. And that's what you have before you in attachment B. So as we've been working with our cities and counties over the summer, we've been measuring our progress towards these measures that you've reviewed before, such as when we're looking at a priority goal of health, it's how are we going to increase the percentage of dwelling units that are within a half mile of a connecting trail. It's currently at 41% of the households in our region are within a half mile of a connecting trail. We would want to aim to get it to 61%. And when we're looking at the environmental justice goal, we're measuring success or like progress towards that goal of creating equitable trail access across households regardless of income level or race. So no longer having that 30% disparity based on whether you live in a low income household in our region or not. So those are two of the performance metrics that we've really been driving toward when we're looking at identifying these network connections. And with those in mind, I wanted to share some of the high level parts of what we've seen so far in our network identification. We've had a lot of great coordination with both partners who work at water-related agencies, whether that is flood control or other municipal utility districts, people that saw a way that they might be able to help build out the trail network and how we're going to be able to connect all parts of the region. Also, since access to waterways is a very popular part of local planning efforts, there are already a lot of planned connections that we could maximize. They're already on your list of things that you wanted to achieve at the local level. We've also seen a lot of really great potential for making progress towards the all ages and abilities goal. There are a number of different trail segments that would provide you the alternate access to having to travel on high speed or high traffic roadways. Apologies. So there are over half of the nominated planned trail segments that we have, that we've collected so far, are demonstrating consistency with that goal and moving us closer to that metric of being able to bypass 30 plus miles of 30 plus miles of high traffic, high volume, in other words, high stress roadways. And we've also seen a lot of positive movement towards reducing that, or not reducing, increasing the number of households that are going to be within a half mile of a connecting trail. That was the goal under our health metric. How are we going to measure the progress toward that? We don't have the exact numbers yet because that is a level of analysis that you would run once we have a more complete draft and all of the lines on the map. But over half of the nominated trail segments are demonstrating that sort of connection. And then part of why we do not have a publicly available draft at this time. There was also a goal that you reviewed back in June about how we would be able to identify trails that are going to provide parallel access to high crash corridors. So where you have demonstrated crashes, whether they're focused on people biking and walking, whether people biking or people walking are being struck by a person driving a car or otherwise involved with the crash, or whether it's just a high number of crashes. We are having a very difficult time meeting that goal, and it is a work in progress finding these parallel corridors that are going to get you to the same destinations that you might have been trying to reach if you were on that corridor or you're biking or walking on that corridor, and it is noted, it is demonstrably dangerous. So we're maybe about 2/3 of the way towards our 30-mile of parallel trail connections and still working on it. And we are also working on identifying the connections that are going to create that all ages and abilities network. We still have a lot of gaps or areas where you have perhaps 1 mile of trail that is going to connect you to the public gathering places in this community. And we're really starting to dig deep to find those opportunity corridors that are beyond what we've discussed with you, even with abandoned rail corridors, canals, and levee tops. We are still working on this, and I think that when we are able to share some maps in November, we will probably still have some gaps that we will be looking to you as the board to problem solve with us and to come up with the solutions of how we create the connected network. And lastly, this is something that I think probably everyone understands. It has created a little bit more need for coordination. The Great Resignation, there's been a huge amount of staff turnover at local agencies. That means that there's a loss of the local planning context. But on the upside, that means that we are getting to work with people with new ideas and bringing new perspectives to how we can build out these trail. Apologies again. How we are going to be able to build out these trail connections. So I wanted to actually leave on this, where I must have jumbled it up. What we're looking to create with this is the trail network that is going to provide you the connections to these places that residents want to go, where they're not going to feel like they can't take people, they can't take their kids, or they can't take their parents if they're out here visiting, or their friends who maybe just walk slower. I know I might be guilty of thinking that some of my friends walk too slow, but what we can do to build or identify the vision of the network that is going to make it possible for residents throughout the region to make these connections. So I wanted to close on that and stop for any questions, either from the committee or otherwise.
Thank you, Victoria. I see a hand up. Vice Chair Sander.
Yeah, this is a really exciting project. I can't wait to see what the final product is.
Yeah.
My community kind of blew it in terms of getting citizen input into this database. By the time we were announcing it citywide, I think we announced what a great thing this was to do, like on a Friday or Saturday, and it closed on Sunday. It was some dumb window like that where I got 25 emails saying, why are you promoting something that's already closed? So I don't know how much was missed from my community in terms of input, but we we've got kind of a central role in the region, and you saw that #1 up there earlier on the map. For example, there's a lot of bike commuting that goes on to Rancho Cordova jobs, but there are some huge barriers to actually getting your bike here from some neighboring jurisdictions. And some of those are going to require some creative solutions. Like, all of us have these cement V ditches or cement flat bottom ditches that are drainage ditches. They come, out of a pipe of the ground, big pipe out of the ground, and then suddenly go out in the open because they got to a certain size. You can imagine continuing the pipe, covering it over, and using those old drainage ways as bike connections. They run right through neighborhoods. They're nice and direct and straight. It could be an enormous resource, but there'll be huge local opposition because someone's backyard backs up to that, and they're sure that you're building a homeless camp back there instead of a bike trail. So that you'd have that kind of opposition. But there's also opportunity. I mean, dare I even suggest, if we had another connection over the American River in Rancho Cordova, you could directly feed much of Desmond's district to jobs in Rancho Cordova that currently require them, just because of the bend in the river and the street geometry on the other side, that currently require people to ride in very dangerous conditions, miles and miles out of their way to get to the other bridge. So there's real opportunity here. That also would create an unbelievable destination for parents and kids along the parkway. You'd have Soilborn Farms on one side and FEO Nature Center on the other side. Golf in between, 2 huge park areas sort of combined by that. But anyway, I hope those level of ideas are going to find their way in here, even though my community kind of managed not to submit many recommendations to the plan.
Thank you, Vice Chair Sander. Don't feel bad. We put the word out, and I don't know we got a whole lot of input in any case. So I'm not sure what it would have made a difference. Let's go to the other side of the river. Director Desmond.
Thank you, and thank you, Victoria, for the presentation. I agree. This is really, really exciting discussion. And Director Sander wants to enlist me in an effort to establish another crossing over the American River there. Of course, that would resign me to only being a one-term supervisor, of course.
Pedestrian only, pedestrian only, pedestrian and cycle only, maybe horse.
Well, perfect, great. I think we need to have a discussion, and we missed an opportunity in, what was it, the 70s when we were going to have it. James and I had a conversation about this a few days ago. I mean, I have multiple environmental justice communities in the northern part of my district, the unincorporated areas of Sacramento County, where there's virtually no trail network, no opportunities at all. And I think we have opportunities this year with some additional funding, as long as we can get all the people on the right page at Sacramento County, certainly. And so, I look forward, Victoria, to maybe having a separate discussion with you and James, where you can help educate me and we can help strategize a little bit and get really innovative with ideas, what we can do for people in those areas. Because it would be, if we could establish a network for folks up in the North Highlands and Foothill Farms area, and that would be wonderful. And we also have opportunities not only along some of the larger commercial corridors, but also old railroad rights of way and canals, that same kind of canals that Director Sander was referring to. So I'm really excited about this and excited about the opportunities we have and that it presents.
Thank you, Director Desmond. Let's go to the public. Any attendees or members of the public want to speak on this item? I don't see any hands up. Jessica's confirming for me no as well. Okay, I'm going to bring it back. Yeah, I'll just quickly say I wholeheartedly agree. This is, similar to our next generation transit strategy, another way for us to, connect people together and provide more improved mobility throughout our region. So I'm really excited as well. I know we have our own Laguna Creek Regional Trail that we're hoping is in there too. So look forward to seeing the final product, Victoria. No pressure.
Do you mind if I just say one quick thing for all the members on this? This is in some ways similar to the green zones that we went through about 18 months ago, to have all of you across the region say, where are your infill areas that have lower levels of driving? 23, 24 jurisdictions of 28, put your hands up. Past resolutions did the hard work. But on the regional network, trail network, actually 28 of 28 of you need to do this because if we don't have one of you, the network falls apart. There is no regional network, right? There's missing pieces, there's gaps, whether they're rivers or barriers or freeway, whatever they may be. So I think this is a really exciting project. I think this literally kind of puts us and many of our communities on the map, so to speak. But we are going to probably need your help, I think, in some places where it's a great example, honestly, when we think about this, of the sort of the patchwork quilt we have in the region and the need to stitch some of these plans together, because if we don't stitch them together, they don't actually work. So placeholder, we may need your help to really, elevate this into something that I think is worthy of. We know your staffs are super busy. Victoria mentioned the Great Resignation. So we've got lots of turnover, but the next few months here are going to be critical so that we can then show you, Victoria can show you what that map looks like, but the map can't have a bunch of gaps in it.
We are officially put on notice, James. Thank you. And Victoria, thank you for your work. That this is a lot of good work. So look forward to developments on here. But don't go anywhere, Victoria, because I know you have the next item. Fiscal year 22-23 Caltrans Sustainable Transportation Planning Grants.
I feel like if I was going to summarize this into one sentence, I would say that this is a tool for what you, Chair Soon, and Director Branscombe had been talking about how the land use planning and the transportation planning are going to work together and move together or move forward together. I highly encourage everyone to share this information about the Caltrans planning grants with their staff. We've been reaching out to all the cities and counties and transit operators about this annual funding opportunity that is managed by Caltrans. There is $17 million in sustainable communities planning grants that cities, counties, tribes, and other public transportation entities can apply for. There's also a smaller segment of strategic partnership growth or grants that RTPAs like EDCTC and PCTPA and also SACOG, and then MPOs also like SACOG can apply for. There's $1.5 million in strategic partnership grants. SACOG is proposing a strategic partnership planning grant looking at the supportive infrastructure needed to make our region ready for freight electrification. Sam Shelton has more specifics on that project if we were to need to get into it. And there's also a subset of strategic partnership grants that are focused on transit and multimodal connections. And SACOG is looking to partner with the city of Sacramento on a Lower American River Bridge study. And there's more information on those that we could get into at the committee's interest. And also acknowledging the committee's very dwindling amount of time.
Yeah, thank you, Victoria. And I want to thank Sue Tacker and Caltrans for making this grant available as well. Any comments from the directors on this item? Seeing none. Members of the public, are there any comments? I see none there either. Okay, again, this is also an informational item. And I know we have a lunchtime venue coming up. I'll let James get into that. But before we go there, any other comments from the directors? Okay.
Just thank you, Mr. Chair. Good meeting.
Thank you very much, everybody. Great participation. James, you want to give us a head? Oh, thanks, guys. Heads up on the noon hour.
Yeah, why move? Just stay in the same place, get back on the new Zoom link. or we promise at some point soon, we're going to have actual food and we're going to be in person for these. But we have a great guest speaker, Jim Pfeiffer from the Regional Water Authority. He's going to be talking about drought, climate resilience, and even Green Means Go. We've mentioned those green zones, but they actually need a lot of water infrastructure to make those areas really work for more housing. So log back on that link. I should have resent that to everybody this morning, and we'll see you in a couple of minutes, I hope.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Meeting adjourned. See you later.
Thank you.